Hello, this is Corey and Gelat. Yes, I am back with the holiday spirit, indeed, of Christmas, of New Year's, whatever. All these times, these crazy times of COVID and all these other things. Oop, I shouldn't have said that word. But yes, there's a lot of things that happen in the world, and of course, things can sometimes happen to you as well. Yes, your personal life, which of course I don't want to tell the whole world about, but I like to be honest, I like to be transparent, and through time I'm going to tell pretty much everything, probably, honestly, with the amount of content I do publish on my channel. And hey, I'm allowed to take breaks once in a while. Honestly, I said for the longest time, like, I'm going to take a break, I'm going to take a break, and I never did, because I just have this soul attachment to this work that I do, because I really see it as that essential, that important. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about all these things. Really, the reason why I really couldn't publish anything online, if that's the right word, is that I don't know what I could or should say about my situation. Due to the nature of our world, it's kind of tough of what to, if I should say something or if I should not, depending on the nature of the situation too, of course. And when things get like a little weird, I'm just like, probably gotta wait on it, or just leave it at that. Don't know if I could, don't know if I should. But either way, if you stay true to who you are, you stay to the truth, you're not harming anybody, you're not creating any victims, you're not causing any crimes, it's not really a big stinking deal. And really, honestly, what I think would help people anyways, aside, I can go into a long personal story, into all these personal stories. I know I don't talk a lot about myself on this channel, but that's because I don't think it's important to talk about myself. A lot of these health gurus and people out there want to always talk about their personal stories because that's how people can, relate and understand those stories better. But as great as they are, I like to try to take things and compact it in different informational forms, observable forms, of general worldly forms that can apply to a lot more people in easily more digestible ways, such as diagrams, which is what I actually have to present for you guys today. Although, of course, there are a whole bunch of different topics, and everything is connected, though. I mean, everything in life, all my diagrams, I've created many in the past through my documentaries, and these diagrams, of course, are connected to that too. But yeah, they're also connected to each other. These are diagrams that I created during my so-called break, hiatus, whatever you want to call it. And if you're watching this video because you're like, what in the world happened? And I sent you here. Yeah, like I said, I don't know what I could or what I should say because it's just due to the nature of our world. I mean, we take so many things for granted. Freedom is really an essential aspect of this life. And life is gentle, right? We have to be careful, really careful. I mean, ultra careful, because we don't know sometimes what's going to happen. We may have intuitive feelings and feeling out our environment and using the knowledge that we do know and trying to attain common sense knowledge. But then there's knowledge that we don't always know, like economics or the effects of technology, what it's actually doing to us, all the subconscious elements, right? And of course, there's more to that. And, I can talk about it and it may make it seem like, oh, I know about it. But nobody knows about it, even somebody who claims to be aware of it, right? There's things that we all don't see in day-to-day life that are there, that are often influencing us. And sometimes it's some of the most basic things. And there's also reasons why things happen, and we have to look at that too. So, it's all about, and funny we use the word reason. During my break, I noticed a lot of people are debating each other about objective morality. I kind of found it funny to kind of pitch in on this notion. All I say is to replace the word objective with natural and morality with authority, and the whole situation is easier. Because people wrap themselves around words. And I really don't think natural law is the best way to deliver this information. I don't even think statism is the best way to deliver this information. So really stay tuned for my coming works on all that, because I find it surprising just through observing through my time that I was gone. I'm like, oh my gosh, I do have perspectives that I do have to share. Everybody has their perspectives that they have to share, and eventually, with the more knowledge that we compile, then yes, we are going to see more predictions. We're going to see more things um, being seen in for the future, right? I mean, you see all these so-called conspiracy theorists of the past predicting everything that's happening now. No surprise, they compiled knowledge that nobody else had in order to come to those conclusions. One thing that also troubles me that I often see is complacency. There's a lot of people who live their lives with no really internal drive or motive or spirit or soul really driving their life, and that troubles me. It's like, where is that gone? Why do they not have it with them? They have the creative ability. They have a soul, right? They're not like, they don't have empathy. It's not like that. It's not like they're totally lost as an individual, but do they know what they're actually promoting? Are they actually doing something greater for humanity that they really feel inside as something that's really, really important and powerful? I think this is something that everybody should want to attain, is this greater meaning in life. And then you wonder why a lot of people, especially my generation, will say, well, I'm depressed, I'm sad, this or that, and they don't have this greater meaning. They think everything has already been done, and celebrities have done it, and look at them, and then they get jealousy and ego, and all these things get in the way, and it becomes this complex manifested scenario. The least I can do, like I said, is create diagrams and help people come to their own conclusions based on a lot of that matter, right? So that's what the diagrams are here to represent. But yeah, so that hopefully answers anybody's question on why I was gone, even though I kind of went into a whole different tangent, as I usually do. But then you know why I produce video content, and why there's so much content to still produce. There is definitely a lot, for sure. So, let's see, what else? I got some notes here. Alright, so we got 4 diagrams to go over. Exactly. And the first one we're going to go over is natural attraction versus unnatural attraction. Yes, indeed, love is what makes the world go around. Seriously, if it weren't for love, well, I wouldn't be speaking. If it weren't for love, I wouldn't have the care to change the world. I mean, love is everything from creation to change, which is also creation. Love is this driving, motivating force that is within people, even if they love things, right? Even though those are not really things that can give you love back, and they might be an illusion. Well, this diagram pretty much covers everything, which includes even those illusions. So we have natural attraction, which is sanity. And you can see on the opposite side, of course, it's basically polar opposites. And you may say, well, Corey, your diagrams deal a lot with dualities. Well, yes, and I have a video that's going to talk about duality. So take a look at that if you're interested, because some people think, well, nothing is really dual. I mean, you may say man and woman and sun and moon, but no, they're not distinct differences. And well, my argument is that actually it's quite natural for us to utilize morality, to utilize duality. Morals, right and wrong, is another duality. We're pretty much inclined to those dualities. Not that we can't also see the bigger picture, or the dualities within the bigger picture. See, everything is often a matter of perspective. When I also made my video, says you don't need evidence, you need perspective. I really wish a lot more people saw that and said, hey, well, why am I then super analyzing this whole objective morality scenario? Because a lot of people do. A lot of people overly analyze this natural law scenario, and that's why I, did a video on the problems with natural law debunked. So simply to open perspectives, to say, wait, if this is what it is, it's pretty much like the other laws of nature, but of course we're dealing with reason. We're dealing with the brain. Aspects of the mental and the spiritual, they're totally different than physical laws. And so if you're interested in that, check out those videos. But natural attraction is all about self-control, consciousness, another word for love. It's an expanding force, right? I'm open for hugs. Same in nature. This is a very important part, right? If somebody is attracted to somebody who is not similar of their own nature, then there may be some sort of illness going on mentally, or some sort of reason why that person may have such an attraction. And that's where unnatural attraction comes into play, is that there may be an attraction to someone that's different in nature. Now you may say, well, what if this person likes this color and you like that color? Well, I'm not talking about preferences. I'm saying in nature, meaning, if you're of a certain age, they're of a certain age, they're of a certain type, they're of a certain type, right? Base natures, basest natures, right? Both parties want love, or the other one wants to manipulate each other. That's not love, right? If they both share an equal bond of love toward each other, that's same base nature. If they both can live in harmony together because they share the same things ultimately, that really create that bond, then yes, that is natural attraction. So we have to make those distinctions. And like I said, I'm going to leave a lot of this toward your interpretation as well, and I, of course, encourage any of your thoughts as well. Now, natural attraction, sensuality, beauty, protection, innocence, victimless, right? All these things, very, very important, because you wouldn't want to be on the unnatural side, which is exploitation, victim harming, lack of family support, very, very important. If you are heading in the right path and there's bumps along the road, as long as you're heading in the right path, those bumps will be okay. You'll get over the bump. It's like a little speed bump in the road, and you drive over it, everything's okay, right? Slows you down for a second, but then you get back to normal speed. And of course, I also like to say that a natural attraction is real love. An unnatural attraction is not love. Because if it's not real love, then it's not love, right? It's like, again, saying natural law versus man's law. Well, okay, natural law is the law, and man's law is just not anything, really, except somebody's opinions. It's arbitration. So, natural attraction can be childish, sure. There can be maturing in the process. Like I said, there could be curiosity, there could be appeal, there could be problems with the unnatural world in combination. That's the box at the bottom, where technology also comes into play. This can play a really big role on how a natural attraction manifests, right? So these are just really key aspects to understand, because somebody could also have good intentions and then get fooled, or somebody screws them over and they didn't see it coming. And if the attraction on both sides is set in accordance to one another, then it's likely that you have a scenario of real love. I mean, heck, you'll feel it. It's a love, right? How are you supposed to describe such a feeling? I went years of my life writing about these subjects, and I'm like, didn't even know how to write them sometimes. But really, I over time I've realized how simple these subjects actually are, and that we do overcomplicate these things. And we also have movies and culture that overly dramatizes and makes things not seem the way that they're supposed to be, or aggregating certain reactions that wouldn't have naturally happened in nature. Natural attraction is also spiritual, sacred, gentle, special. All these different words to essentially, represent the same thing. Conscience, meaning that you're not ill because you understand, the difference between right and wrong behavior. Essentially, you have empathy, right? Let's see here. Unnatural attraction also says it's not upheld in an unnatural world, often because, well, let's say if you have an unnatural world, you're not going to necessarily have nature in its jurisdiction, in its law, right? So you're not going to have anything natural come out of it. Even if the world is inherently natural, you're going to always have both. You're going to have natural and unnatural, and sometimes you're not going to know the difference between the two, especially in an unnatural world, right? But it's key to then make these distinctions. That's why I make the diagrams. That's why I define what is natural versus unnatural. If you're curious about that, check out my previous videos. Now, of course, innocence can lead to mistakes, perceptual and technological. You have creative pursuits and passions, and of course, I have all these arrows pointing to the box ultimately from this point. And then you have unnatural conditions naturally rid of due to natural attraction. So if, let's say, you have an unnatural condition, let's say, what's a good example? Living in a polluted environment, okay, because this doesn't just apply to love. Again, love can be toward things and toward your own body, toward yourself. Of course, it shouldn't be only yourself or only your environment and such, but of course, a shared love for all things, all living things. To have that love will naturally get rid of these conditions as you see they're unpleasant, as you see they're unnatural, as you see they're affecting you in negative ways. So you're not going to want to continue that attraction, and therefore that condition is no longer going to persist. So in the case of natural attraction, unnatural conditions are naturally rid of, which in other words means that love wins. Unconditional. Regardless of the condition, love wins because it is the intent, it is the heart of the matter, the literal heart in this case, right? And it's funny because you can look at karma, which we're going to get into, and I have natural karma versus unnatural karma, and I talk a lot about the government, of course. Government will use violence even in the situation, right? Even in these situations, they won't look at the reason or the intent of an individual necessarily. They might, depending on, their justice system, and every system is different because it's, of course, how this world works in such a degree that people allow it to happen and give certain people authority. But they will use violence as a means for what is right. Does that seem right to use something that is inherently wrong, to use for something that is right? Is there a justification that can be made for that? Is that justification right, or is it just a justification? So these are the questions you have to ask, and as we go through the further diagrams, of course, everything will become even more clear. This is really easy to look through the lens of love. I think it's probably harder when you start tying in with a whole bunch of other things, because attraction, the word can mean really attracting to anything. So we have to really take that through the perspective of one at a time if we're going to look at each scenario. Now, note, it says at the bottom, this is looking at the box. Technology creates unnatural conditions regardless of the attraction aggregating any attraction. Okay, so it can aggregate different attractions. Again, looking at perceptual and technological, and if you look at where all the arrows are going, this will start to make more sense to you, but it is still dependent on the user. Everything's dependent on you. Everything goes through you in this world. You are ultimately the decider of what happens, or what builds, what gets created, right? You're the creator. What you attract is what you create. So just keep that in mind on your journey, and keep in mind that technology can be this illusion that can sometimes pull you toward different winds, if you will. There's a reason why I call technology the second government, and I really mean that, because it is something that you have to understand sometimes, whether it be before or after understanding the nature of government. It is one that is also the same in the fact that it will control you, and you think you need it, and you put a great amount of dependence into it, and you're the one that's ultimately feeding it. Of course, its nature is completely different from that of government, but I do call it the second government due to its nature of how it controls people's minds, and how people use it as an illusion of truth or what they actually want, but they're not actually getting what they actually want. And that happens all the time with government. I mean, how many times are people going to elect politicians and just hope for better results? I mean, how many times until they finally learn that it's not actually working, right? And how many times does society have to rebuild itself and then collapse, rebuild itself and then collapse, for people to finally learn what's actually happening and why these things actually happened in the first place? Again, this is why complacency bothers me so much. When I was on my break, I had to see, people with a lack of soul, lack of faith, lack of spirit, and wanting to do something greater with their lives. It bothers me deeply because I have a passion. I have a soul. I know who I am. I'm true to myself. And I stick to that through all ends. I don't care, right? I will always defend who I know I am. And only I can truly say I know who I am, right? But the best thing to do is also share that. Share that passion with others, as I do in these diagrams and through all my works. Ultimately, you get to also see within my own mind what goes on, right? This is how everybody does things too. It is all projection, even if it isn't projection, right? I'm not projecting here, but this is a projection of my thoughts, right? So I can't deny that it isn't. Everything is, and everything is connected. This is how life works. It's an amazing, beautiful process. But do people see the beauty enough to no longer be depressed, enough to realize that there's meaning and that there's hope and that they can actually change things and create communities? I don't know. And then you may say, well, Corey, do you have experience of doing that? I actually do. I created guilds in World of Warcraft. Oh, that's not significant because it's in a video game. I managed to change something that was previously never there. And we turned it into something that outbeat everything. It was amazing what happened in World of Warcraft. I'm not going to go deep into myself, and like I said before, I don't like to talk about myself, especially when all this other stuff is happening in the world. I kind of find it a little selfish, and I think it's important that we focus on really what's affecting people's freedoms. But seriously, there's different experiences. We don't know what people go through too, and people make assumptions of other people. Things like this happen all the time. Again, what are you attracting? Are you attracting knowledge? Are you attracting an open heart, an open mind? These are all attractions, right? I'm attracting possibility when I mention all these things and go on tangents and rants about a whole bunch of different subjects and say, well, it could go here, there's a bunch of possibilities. I say that on purpose because this is me saying, here's the freedom. Don't wrap your head in certain ideologies or certain mindsets. It's pretty much infinite, and you can contradict yourself on any point to which you choose. Shall you focus on it and provide yourself with enough perspective? That's why you don't need evidence. That's why you only need perspective. Is because if you can look at things from the right angles, you'll find everything you need to find. So, unnatural attraction, basically the opposite of everything I said about natural attraction. Lack of consciousness, lack of family support, therefore that paved way, right, with those bumps are going to be pretty darn bumpy. It's going to be hard to really control your driving. You might end up crashing into the tree. This is just, of course, me using an analogy. Unnecessary, could be an addiction in that case. Dirty, lack of control, fake, superficial, forced, bestiality. Of course, all this plays into the nature of our current world, and it's much materialism, it's much objectifying. You have broken conscience and mental illness. You have unnatural attraction says it's upheld in an unnatural world. Unnatural conditions persist. Okay, so mistakes are essentially embraced. Wrongdoing is essentially allowed. And of course, it says at the bottom right that counseling, accountability, people with unnatural attraction and embrace that, of course, may actually need real help, which is simply through natural attraction, as it would most make sense. Again, if the government does not contradictively help people in that regards, then it should be fine. It is, from my point of view and seeing all the so-called prison reformers in the 1800s whose message and truths got completely ignored back in the day. They would visit jails, they would talk to everybody, they'd find out most of it is victimless, and they'd see that really the real help that is getting to them is natural attraction, people who are talking with them and addressing their concerns. Time and space allowed for them to address their concerns, those things, not so much the violent acts and the forced imposed will and the bars and the chains holding people against their will. It's not that helps people. It's natural attraction that helps people. Love attracts love. You can't have unlove and death and evil attracting love. It just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so that's why it says violence solves nothing, and the government is entirely arbitrary. So keep that in mind. People like to also define such institution as a monopoly on violence. Now, of course, I have many ways of wording this in better ways that I recommend you check out after this video. Um, in the coming weeks, months, etc., you'll see that a common theme within my works is understanding that we can use different words to describe these scenarios. We're not limited to certain terms, and there may be really strategic, more powerful ways to deliver this knowledge. Claims of unnatural attraction must be evaluated as you see due to the possibilities and the amount of influences in today's world, the illusions, the misrepresentation of intent. There needs to be intent, right? This is why there's court systems and why there's people who evaluate situations, investigators, detectives, etc. But that still does not justify an act of violence in any form or an act of theft, an act of crime, etc. You should get the point by now. Alright, now keep in mind where the arrows are heading to the box in the middle where it talks about technology, and keep in mind technology's influence, because I think this is something that we're still coming to understand. I've always noticed that a lot of writers of the past, a lot of them are great writers, right? You have all these founding fathers, they don't talk about technology. Why? Because they didn't have it in their time zone. So we need writers now to talk about technology. In my opinion, there's not really enough. Not enough talk about the effects of technology, since it's still rather new to our world. And I wouldn't expect anybody of the old world, that being the 80s, 70s, 60s, whatever, where have you, to ever understand technology in its fullest either, and understand its implications, or on the generations ahead, because it's not really their fault. It's a new invention. It's something that came out of really nowhere, and it just boomed, right? Humans are basically aligned, married to technology. I'm definitely not against technology. If you see a lot of my videos, I talk about how it's the product of freedom. We should not bash technology or impose restrictions upon it. This is a product of freedom. It's great. This is what allows me to deliver messages. What I'm saying is that technology provides an illusion, just as you listening to me with these words are not coming from as an actual person that you see face to face, that you see in your day-to-day life, that you talk to, and can sense them, right? Again, sensuality, natural attraction. I'm not saying that there's an unnatural attraction when you go online, but if you constantly are, then I'd say you probably are, right? This is meant to be interpretive. If you are talking with a lot of real-life people, and having more of those real conversations, even if it's within family or friends, just to keep that natural conversation abilities intact, then you're good, right? Because if you can make the distinction between technology and real life, or unnatural versus natural, then you can see a bigger picture that some people who are either stuck in either one can't see the other one, right? I mean, you have a lot of older people. I think they're great. They have a lot of great perspectives for the world, but they don't know how to use the new technology. Unfortunately, sorry, but just as books, people had to learn how to read books and learn how to write. There were people called pen writers who had to teach people how to sign their name and stinking write. I mean, that's not even a profession anymore as much, because now it's, technology and everybody knows how to do it, and the school system does, etc. But, the same thing now is, the book is the equivalent to technology. You have to learn it. You have to stay up with the times. Unfortunately, the times require that you stay up with it. You can't sit back and complain and say, I'm not dealing with this. This is all just BS. And no, there's validation as to why people use it, why it came about. It came about due to your generation. Your generation brought it there. So a lot of people who are of older of age may, I think they can respect some of the things I say, but also question some of the things I say, and I say their question is valid and worthy. Definitely. Them questioning why I have certain belief systems and ideologies too. Heck, I will say, there's a lot of people that I know who completely dismiss what I say or do not look into what I say. I mean, at the very least, at least look into it. I'm not an unreasonable person. I'm willing to sit there with you. I'm willing to have a conversation. I'm not going to nudge you off and say, go read this, go do that. No, I'm willing to sit there with you and have a conversation, if you will. As long as you are reasonable and you have the tolerance and patience to listen to me and share your input. And also, if you have to for a moment, put your own thoughts aside, put your own cognitive dissonance aside to see a whole new perspective. Perhaps it is possible that what I'm saying is actually possibly true. I have to say that to myself. Is it possible that what I'm saying is actually true? Is it possible that it isn't true? Is it possible that I'm just justifying the existence of my words and justifying the existence of these concepts to try to justify my own ego? Is that possible? I ask myself these questions all the time because anybody who deals with these subjects is pretty much bound to ask themselves these questions if they actually want to be authentic, if they actually have an intent that seeks truth. You're going to stinking question everything. You're gonna make yourself crazy. But of course, I mean crazy in a good sense. So, anyways, that was natural attraction versus unnatural attraction. Again, sorry for going to a bunch of different tangents. I think it's also important to mention, and on behalf of, my personal situation, which again, I don't like to necessarily talk about that much, unless it's necessary to some degree, and could help people, like I said, which is why I create diagrams and such. I was going to publish different podcasts in the past about this. I was going to talk about how I don't have much of a social life. I mean, okay, wow, what a surprising statement. A lot of people say this during COVID, but no, I had some of that even before COVID. I was cyber schooled, but I was also public schooled. Some people might not know these things about me. And so I had an experience of both. I could see cyber school being good, but also now turning bad, of course, as it is somewhat the future. And I was new to it, and the cyber schools were new at the time, so sure, they were great then, but they're probably not going to be great now, and everything's moving toward cyber, so you can, go into a whole nother conversation about that. But I had those experiences, and it's just finding the opportunities to meet people, depending on also where you live. If you guys have any suggestions on where to move, where to go, I would be open to that. My family's been open to that because I can admit to you guys, I'm willing to admit to you guys, yeah, I've had a hard time just socializing in general. Yeah, I've met a lot of people doing what I do and going out places, and I honestly, I'm trying to make it work for myself. I look for a lot of different events and locations and everything that's happening. I try to stay tuned with all of it, mark it on calendars, and I'm also gladfully to admit that, hey, I do this work full time. And I'm fortunate. Yeah, you could say I'm privileged to be able to. I live with my parents. I don't have any expenses of my own, and they see the value in the work that I do. So I do this work, and this is, I consider, my work. Oh my gosh, you're not getting any pay for it. See, I live past these judgments. I don't care what people can judge of me. I know who I am, and I know that this information is bound to get big. And even if I'm wrong, even if I make myself look like a fool, at least I'm doing something that I care about, that I'm passionate about, that gives me soul energy. And I mean it. The soul really does exist. I realized that after so much time of not being able to do what I love to do. It really, really bothered me. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even eat. I mean, insane. That's how much I get fulfillment out of teaching, out of doing this work. And maybe, I'm not trying to say I'm destined for this work and I'm this person or whatever. I'm not trying to be this person, that person. I'm simply myself. I never expected to talk about these subjects, but it happened. I mean, my goodness, I'm sweating. But this is what happens, especially when I talk about the soul. I mean, I realize it exists. It's a feeling that goes deeper than your conscience. Because, if you know that you have no guilt because you know who you are, right? And you know that you've caused no victims, you've done no harm. There's a feeling beyond the conscience that is the soul. And that feeling is totally different, in my opinion. At least that's what I call it. Take it as you wish, of course. I don't expect really to describe it perfectly or anything like that, or people to understand me perfectly, but I will say, based on my experience, it does exist. And I think it's because of my strong attachment to this work. You can say, hey, I'm addicted to this work. I don't know. You can say, oh, I'm brainwashed, I'm in a cult to this work. No, I got my own terminology. And I have my own ways of doing things. I've always had, right? And there's a lot of people in my networks who also don't like me for some of my views on veganism, for example. I'm okay with that, right? I'm open-minded to flat earth and some other things. I'm open-minded to quantum grammar, all these crazy things that interest me. Why not? That's my answer. Why not? It doesn't bother me. right? Even if this person's a quack, that person's a quack, it doesn't bother me. The thing is the contribution, what's actually getting done at the end of the day. I'm not about identity and ego. I'm not about that. So, anyways, let's move on to the next diagram, natural karma versus unnatural karma, because I could go on the other subjects for days and on end. But like I said, if you have any suggestions on where to go, move, etc., let me know. We're looking for a community of people who care just as much as we do, and I'm willing to learn all sorts of different things about living off-grid and being more in nature. Of course, that's my main message, and I need to learn more about that, for sure. And I'd say most of the world does not have the knowledge that they did 100 years ago, just about nature. You may say we got smarter, we got dumber. No, it's not really either or. We just simply changed our method of communication, our method of information, etc. It's really just changed in form. It's still all there, however. And of course, you have that small thinking populace when you have a lot of people who aren't thinking, but in reality, we can't also degrade people or underestimate people, and people even that we want to attack, we should give them the light of day to say, well, wait, what if you are wrong? Let's ask questions, let's work with you, let's work together, we're all humanity, right? Unless, of course, they have no soul at all, and they're completely devoured in that unnatural attraction because they're just completely mentally ill, and maybe that's a totally different scenario, but we at least can give hope to the average person and give them the light of day to say, hey, what's going on here, and can we make things better? So, I expect that for all peoples. I have nothing against anybody in government. I have nothing against anybody, politician, influencer, celebrity. I don't. Even if they might instigate certain things, they might simply be unconscious of it. Are they really to blame? Well, yes, in part if they actually were the ones directly carrying any action out. But if they were just influencing people, it's not really the influencer's fault, but rather the many millions of people that follow them. So you have to give some people some patience and understanding as to where they are. At the same time, hold them accountable, because my stinking goodness, people, they will draw back their word in a second. I see so many people who are like, oh, I'm anti this, I'm anti that, yeah, I'm on your side, I'm cool, I'm radical, right? And then when push comes to shove, their own life is influenced and money comes into the equation perhaps. No, everything's out of the scenario, right? They become like the average enforcer. I'm just doing my duty regardless of the actual morals or specifics of the situation. Regardless of their actual principles. Do they have principles? The thing is, if people have principles, they have a firm ground to stand on. If they don't have principles and they claim that they're against the system and all that, then they're pretty much going to fall apart pretty darn fast because they aren't rooted into the ground. They don't have roots to ground themselves and say, this is who I am, this is what I do, and this is what I stand for. And this is what I'm going to allow doing, right? So, let's get into natural karma and unnatural karma. Of course, this relates to everything. Natural karma is order, freedom, which is that morality already is law, and morality is authority. Balance and distinction, okay? Very important things. You look at yin and yang, for example. You look at the scales of justice. There's balance and there's distinction. Both, right? The minute you distinct something, you say, well, then we're taking something out of balance. No, if we also don't forget the other half of it. So when I say something positive, you can't forget the negative. When I say something negative, you can't forget the positive. If I say something in one light, you can't forget it in another light, right? And there's a million different types of lighting. So how are you supposed to perceive all these possibilities? Again, the importance of having an open mind and being free to do so. Freedom is what allows all of it. Innocent till proven guilty. Not guilty till proven innocent, quote unquote. Natural karma deals with love. Unnatural karma deals with fear. Natural karma is that all is one, and unnatural karma is that one equals all, right? Again, not really looking at any specifics, not going deeper into the roots to understand what's in a plant, for example, what nutrients are there, rather than just looking at the cover, like saying, well, you can judge a book by its cover. It's the same deal, basically. And are you going to say, well, this drug worked for this person, so therefore it should work with everybody with this condition? No, we live in a world of many conditions. We may all be one human being, but we have many conditions that we live in. Again, you have this paradoxical nature between something that is one thing but could also be another thing. And the same thing is often with the word anarchy. This word is negative connotations and positive connotations, and that's the funny thing about it, because it's paradoxical in its nature. Everything is. That is how nature basically deals with everything, is through paradox, and that's why you have semantics, especially in a world such as now, where there's people like me who will analyze every little stinking thing, but hopefully try to seek the basics. So natural karma is created and manifested through education, ownership, principles, evaluating the act. It's situation dependent, victim based, right? If there's victims involved, it's very important. There's reason involved, there's conversation, there's responsibility, moral obligation, learning by many methods, right? Many different methods. Intent. There's work out. I like to say that word and break it out. Work out, right? When you work out a muscle, you're trying to create some resistance, make that muscle stronger. But what about when you're working out things within your life, making sure everything's organized, or you work out things within your life, working out between two people. Let's say they have a conflict with each other. You say, okay, let's work this out, right? So I use that word for multiple meanings on purpose because I think it's a good word to represent when you are assisting natural karma. Okay, this is natural law essentially summed up. Okay, it's natural karma. That's all it is. You see, there's a guy with his hand on his head thinking with a light bulb, coming to understand the polarity in the world, coming to understand his situation through the use of polarity, through the use of his knowledge that he gains through living the polarity, living this amazing, experimental, beautiful world of possibility. So, unnatural karma, control, slavery, legality is morality, therefore you require permission from an authority, which is man, not nature. You don't look up to some greater truths of nature. Your morality does not come from those greater truths that you seek of looking at actions. No, it comes from some person's opinion where they get to decide based on what they know of actions, or what they want really simply to just do with you and manipulate with you. That's why it's so dangerous to follow somebody with an arbitrary will, so dangerous to follow moral relativism. Now, imbalance and propaganda is also in the case of unnatural karma. Guilty till proven innocent, I already said that. Justification, you always have to create a right, because if the right doesn't naturally exist, as we understand through natural rights, then they would be creating rights and justifying it through the greater good. Say, oh, well, we got to do this because it's for the greater good. If we don't, harm somebody to prevent this harm, then it will just get worse, even though it always, of course, flops on itself because they're using harm for against harm, and it's not even in the case of self-defense. It's literally aggression for aggression, theft for theft, rather than self-defense and non-resistance or non-violence in solving problems, because most of the average person is not going to resort to violence as a first means of solving issues. We'll talk about that in the next diagram. And so violence, theft, whim dependent, which means, again, arbitrary opinion, will. Vices are crimes. Solutions are made by imposing authority, quote unquote, that certain people have a certain legitimate right to rule over others because they are vested. They have the authority. Nobody else does. That's what unnatural karma claims. Again, that's where the word claim comes in. It's like, this is what I claim, and therefore it is. And because I wrote it on a fancy piece of paper, what it says is also what is. And because, words on paper work better than words through speech, because you can understand them, you can see the spelling exactly as to what they are. That's why it's used in the case of law, man-made law. Dependence, of course, is also here. You can see that the little image for unnatural karma is a guy, basically in fear, carrying away from a sword that's coming from an establishment institution, right? So an institution of violence is basically putting this person in fear in order to comply with demands. So they're not really learning about their situation, they're not thinking about their situation, reflecting upon it, looking at the ironies within the world, finding love to keep them moving forward and understanding why their actions were bad. They might just learn because the law said so, because the authority said so. And that's not natural, right? That's not natural therapy, it's not natural attraction, it's not natural karma. So necessary punishment may be seen in the case of unnatural karma. Representation, work duty, crime excused, and obedience. And of course it's funny because you see a lot of hypocrisy in the systems that proclaim to always be helping the situations that they're also permitting themselves. So keep in mind that you choose to embrace natural karma or unnatural karma. Essentially, if you choose to educate yourself or simply just go with the flow and just let things happen and not really put your will into the scenario of change. If you don't put your will and actively take steps to take charge of your life, then you're going to fall to unnatural karma, or things will happen to you and you don't know where you're going to end up. Eventually, it's essentially unnatural karma. You're not learning. You're not attracting what you want necessarily to attract. If you want something to attract, you have to take required steps to do it. It's not just going to manifest on its own. It's not just going to manifest from you hoping that it manifests. You have to be the one to do it, so you have to embrace, nature or denature, natural or unnatural. And that is ultimately what's going to manifest in the world, and that is where you get order and chaos. Okay, next diagram. This goes pretty much hand in hand with what we talked about with karma. This is talking about real help or real therapy. So a tip is to use everything of moderation and simplicity. Again, another example of this would be technology. Because of its impacts, it is important to use it in moderation and simplicity because of all the subconscious, because of how it is such an illusion. It's important that you do such to really keep it under control, right? Self-control. So learn from nature, essentially. Do what's natural. Seek intent and purpose. And if you learn from nature, it's not that technology is the answer. Nature is the answer. Technology came of nature. So don't forget where it came out of. Don't forget where it comes from. Because, if you lose touch of yourself because you're using technology, you say, well, why is this happening? It's because, you forgot the roots to technology. You got wrapped into a cloud of confusion, a cloud that was created out of something else, and you don't know how that cloud got there. So you're just floating in the middle of space, right? You're floating in the middle of the sky, and soon about to fall and disappear. And you're gonna say, well, where am I gonna go next? Because I don't know where I'm going. I'm just going with the flow, man. Going with the flow. No, going with the flow is good. It's good to the extent that you need to be conscious of what flow you're going with. That is, again, where we go back to attraction. So with therapy, there's tolerance, reason, and patience. These are required, essentially, if you really want to help yourself and help others around you and learn from others around you. Everything that has to do with learning and help, which are essentially one and the same, is really essential. I mean, it's no surprise why you go in video games, you see the mages, the priests, the people with the magical wisdom who have read books and have all this knowledge, have these spells and these abilities to heal people, right? And how the church was entrusted with the healing abilities because they had this knowledge of the universe and essentially constitute a sort of religious science, a spiritual science, which is like, today's scientists would say, well, that's all quackery because, religion and science do not go together, even though they're basically creating a whole new religion of science. And it's based on evolution and mainstream ideologies, and they don't always necessarily look at the alternatives. So, we can create religions with anything. Just keep that in mind. And we don't want to restrict ourselves to any mentality, especially in the case of help. You have to question if you are actually mentally ill. You don't know if you are, or if you're permitting some traits of psychopaths or sociopaths or whatever. You have to sit back and reflect and really think about it with tolerance, reason, and patience. And have other people support you and understand your mindset. You write it out for them. You create diagrams. You you really break it down, right? You may say, well, then this is basically just stinking therapy. Yeah, well, if you have a good stinking therapist. But otherwise, really, yourself is the therapist. They can only lead you in the right direction. It's the same thing as a health coach or a doctor when they teach you about your body and about nutrition. You have to be the one to ultimately implement it, to ultimately take it into your hands and say, yes, this health is mine, this body is mine, I'm actually free, I actually need to be healthy. You need to know yourself. And if you know yourself, then it's GG. It's done. Okay? Because if you never give up and you distract totally, or you put yourself in fear totally, then you're really giving up, right? So don't distract yourself totally or put yourself in fear totally, and don't give up, and therefore it will make it much easier to know yourself and to keep yourself. Now, reasonable confrontation can be done through dialogue, presentation, shared suspicion, coaching, awareness. Of course, I'm just looking over this diagram. And coaching involves questions, of course, questioning yourself. It's the same thing as thinking. Questioning, thinking, same thing. If you actually seek to think outside the box, then you're asking questions. The most important binding factor is that you have family and or a support system and environment. If you have a toxic environment or a toxic support system, you're not going to get anywhere. Your natural attraction will not persist, and you're going to lead to unnatural conditions, and those unnatural conditions are going to persist. And, it's this is where illusions also come in and say, well, wait, this illusion I don't actually need in my life. It's like alcohol. Okay, alcohol makes me happy, doesn't affect anybody. This is where we can get into vices. But it doesn't need to actually be there because it's not natural. I don't need it in my life, right? It's just there as a sort of coping mechanism. And it's there. It's not really bothering anyone. I can try to control it. But what if I don't? And can I live without it? Do I know if I can? Right? And that's where we can get more into the scenario where you have to really help yourself. And not help yourself literally by giving yourself more alcohol, more food, but help yourself in the sense of questioning your own intent, and say, well, wait, maybe I don't need another piece of cake. Help yourself in that way. So the opposite. But you are technically still helping yourself. So you're making the choice at the end of the day if you want to pick up that cake or if you don't. Now, the optimal and necessary sort of therapy, I would say, for an unnatural world, which would be pretty darn rare, and I would say everybody needs it, with guidance, of course, is learning how to live in nature, or what may just be called nature living, which includes fighting, hunting, foraging, adapting, etc. If you have all these aspects, then you realize all the materialism, the objectification, all those other things, these illusions, they're basically meaningless, and they're not really important, and it's not what life is about, and there's a lot more exciting things to happen in life, and that we also obsess ourselves over things that are not also important. And again, you have culture influencing you. So when you go in nature, you don't have any of those influences from the denatured world, and you're fully immersing yourself in a natural world. And then when you go the extra step and say, well, I'm going to do natural actions in the natural world, such as these that have been done for thousands of years, you not only go back to your roots, of how you got to where you are. You not only are prepared for the coming world, which we don't know, with the coming days and with things happening, but you're also healing your soul. You're exploring, you're learning, you're gaining wisdom, even if it's just about simple things like this. Like fighting, gaining wisdom from fighting, well, it's an art. See, it's an art, just as cooking is an art, just as yes, adapting is an art. Being able to say, hey, well, I know what to wear in the winter because it's cold. I just have to put on more clothes. This may sound like a stupid example, but that's an art because you understand what needs to be done. You're applying knowledge to the situation. It's like magic. Like, wow, okay, I have this technology. I have this clothing that I created with my mind and with these tools. It's amazing. This wasn't there before. I made it appear to somebody who doesn't know how to do that. That's like magic to them because they don't know how to do it. Again, connecting the dots between looking at video games and looking at the magicians and the people who have the magical spells and are casting and conjuring all these things, right? So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. There's a reason why priests and mages and the church and all that stuff got all interrelated. Freedom, life, property. Don't forget this is also really key. Freedom comes before life and before property. You do not have a life worth living if you are not free. And so freedom always comes first. Always seek freedom. Ultimately, I made a video talking about how everybody ultimately seeks freedom one way or another. But don't forget that life also goes before property. The things are not as important as the people in your life and the spiritual bonds that you build. And that's why people consider freedom to be a spiritual principle as it becomes before life. As we see how important it is through the generations of history and people fighting for it. So be of natural karma, which is the diagram that you can refer to before, and not systems of violence or subjugation. Don't forget about that. That will really ultimately be the best therapy for people, in my view, of course. This is my view on the matter. Now, the last diagram we have here is the nature of a life path. But before we go into that, though, I do want to just go over the first intro part of Lysander Spooner. He was a lawyer who wrote a document called Vices Are Not Crimes, a vindication of moral liberty, from 1875. I'm just going to read the intro here because it's really important with what we talked about with karma, therapy, and attraction. So vices are those acts by which a man harms himself or his property. Crimes are those acts by which one man harms the person or property of another. Vices are simply the errors which a man makes in his search after his own happiness. Unlike crimes, they imply no malice toward others and no interference with their persons or property. In vices, the very essence of crime, that is, the design to injure the person or property of another, is wanting. It is a maxim of the law that there can be no crime without a criminal intent, that is, without the intent to invade the person or property of another. But no one ever practices a vice with any such criminal intent. He practices his vice for his own happiness solely, and not from any malice toward others. Unless this clear distinction between vices and crimes be made and recognized by the laws, there can be on earth no such thing as individual right, liberty, or property, no such things as the right of one man to the control of his own person and property, and the corresponding and co-equal rights of another man to the control of his own person and property. For a government to declare a vice to be a crime, and to punish it as such, is an attempt to falsify the very nature of things. It is absurd as it would be to declare truth to be falsehood or falsehood truth. Now that is just the intro to his little writing on Vices Are Not Crimes, a Vindication of Moral Liberty from 1875. Again, that's Lysander Spooner, somebody I greatly admire his works of, and that's from the 1800s. I mean, it's amazing. The guy is talking about natural law and all these concepts that we talk about on my channel and throughout these communities, like the One Great Work Network. And he was really spot on. He was a lawyer. He knew the system, a lot about it. And he even used the system to his benefit, created his own postal office. I mean, the guy was amazing. So if you haven't heard of him, haven't checked him out by now, definitely check him out. I would suggest it. So this final diagram goes into a bit more of the passion I speak that I have, and the passion that is really, really important for our world. And so here it starts, of course, let's start at the very bottom, because this is an arrow pointing upward. So we have generations, the creator could be even parents creating a child, or ancestry, right? All these things lead to you, which is created by birth, by your nature. It's funny because the word nature also means birth. So birth/nature is what I put there. That is essentially the coming to be of you. You were formed through the generations, through the creator, through ancestry, and that's what created you, your nature, your base nature, if you will. And then from there, the word that is along the line says nurture. So from the nature, you nurture. And therefore, you may say that the line previously that led up to you was nurturing for a new nature. So nature, nurture, nature, nurture. The cycle goes on, right? And as different things change in form, different natures are acquired. This goes for all things in nature, which is why I always say nature is the answer, and mean it literally for almost every single case and every single definition. because I can look at the nature of this phone, the nature of technology, the nature of government. All those things have natures of their own, and then you can go into the nature of each and every single government, right? Even though their base nature is problematic within itself when we look at it. So here, as we move along this line, this diagram we got here, we got man-made control and man-made blockades. Easily put and easily said as man-made law or slavery, and those blockades can get in the way, right, of your destiny, of your life, of where you're trying to go. Certainly, they could be in all sorts of different forms, not just man-made law, but man-made creations as a whole. You don't know, right? I mean, car deaths. How many people die from car accidents? How many families does that affect? I mean, there's many things that happen in the denatured world that we live in. And I'm not blaming all man-made creations, as many can be assisting people's nature, but that's why we have to evaluate each and every single one of them. And no doubt about it, it's not really nature that's affecting people. And nature, if anything, is only just responding to what people are actually creating themselves. So then we have, after the blockades and the control, which of course is a whole different subject of its own, which the other diagrams moreover describe, you have illusions and means. I call it illusions or means because sometimes illusions could be means toward a way of getting places. Again, it could be whatever you see as a coping mechanism, or as a drive to do things, as a compensation, however you want to see it. Illusions are usually partaken in for that reason. Again, there's a lot of projecting in today's world. If you can get a lot through technology, people will do it when they find out that they can, right? So just keep in mind, illusions are among the path. They can be good, they can be bad, depending on the user, as we talked about before. Ultimately, depending on the attraction, depending on the soul expression, the life path, the passion. You know, if those illusions and those means take you over, then yeah, you're probably going to stay within that man-made control system. But you're still going to have illusions even without that system, because that's just the nature of our world. That's why some people claim, well, everything's an illusion, right? So just keep that in mind when you go about in life. I mean, this is looking at everybody's life, essentially. You have a life path. You know, some people want to say there's a number for your life path, and here's your astrology, etc. I'm not here to go into any of that. You can look into it. Great. Have fun. But, and I'm not to say, well, this is valid, that's not valid, I don't think it's valid, here's my reasons why. Like, no, just look into it for yourself. Great. Awesome ancestral stuff that, you know, our ancestors looked at. Great. If it tells us more about ourselves, great. Even if it's not all true, at least we have it in our minds. Great. And, you know, the same thing is, people will say, well, maybe I shouldn't get prepared for what's coming. Well, why not? I mean, then in case anything does happen, at least then you did get prepared, at least, right? Again, it's like, at least have a conversation with me, at least be open to my perspective, before just closing me off altogether completely and saying I'm completely done with this guy, and oh, his view on veganism is completely wrong. You know, he knows nothing about natural law because of it. I mean, this is, you know, absurd, but this is what some people might actually think. Again, going back to tolerance, reason, patience, which is, funny enough, reason, natural law by itself. So you have that soul expression, which I talked about so importantly, and ultimately this life path of yours leads to your true nature, your destiny, your legacy, right? What you're going to leave for the future ahead. I find it troubling that society rebuilds itself and breaks down, and you see all these TV shows of people saying, yeah, they go on talk show hosts or whatever, and they're like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and everybody applauds them. Oh, they're going to college, they're becoming a nurse, they're doing all these cool things for the world. Are they actually changing anything for the world, though? Are they going to stop the mass amount of government slavery happening? Are they going to change the really big things that are happening that they very well can change if they amass their efforts and put the effort into it? And there's so many people who say, well, good luck with that. That's the answer they give me when I tell them, yeah, you know, I'm trying to further the evolution of humanity. I'm trying to help people understand what their freedoms are so they can defend it and manifest it. As sort of an introduction. And they'll say, oh, well, good luck with that. I don't think that's going to happen. Like, well, okay, obviously you're not doing anything about it. You're obviously not going to help anybody about it. Even if you care about those subjects, you're not doing anything about it. So how much do you really care? You know? It's sad how people can go through their life without really that passion. I really, really gets to me, and why I also care much, like I said, for my own generation. And I still consider myself a young person. I've always kind of struggled in a sense with my old and young self, I will also say, not just my social life. Again, just to get a bit more personal, I deal with a lot of these subjects that require a lot more maturity, right? May you say. That doesn't make me a mature person, though, in all ways. You can't say that. I still like to have fun and play games and party, right? And there's also aspects of me naturally. And that's going to get aggregated due to technology and to parts of our world. That's going to happen naturally. But as long as I stay true to who I am, what do I have to fear? I don't have to fear anything. And so I do persist. I do continue my path, and I do not fear, right? I do fear that, okay, I have to admit there's going to be fears. I mean, you can't say you don't fear, but it's about moving past them, okay? And about being courageous to say, I'm going to actually do my best, and I don't care what the world perceives of me. They can perceive of me whatever the heck they want. I know who I am, and I'm going to persist to change the world, right? Because it's possible. People say that, well, how are you going to change the world? Again, they obviously don't care about changing the world if they can say something as such like that. Or they think that you have to have some sort of weird conspiracy type of mind to say something like that. No. No. It's something that has happened many times before, and actually the fact that one person that have been elected can change the whole world should prove it within itself. The fact that so millions of people can follow one person can prove it within itself. But the fact that so many people can also go into building tall skyscrapers and tall towers should prove it within itself. But they don't see the potential in the world and the beauty that exists. Why is it that life is not seen as such a live characteristic for them? Do they not have the air quality of freedom to really say, I'm free, I can have fun, I can express my soul, I could sing, I could dance, I could do any of that anytime? I don't know what it is, but honestly, it also relates to family life. It relates to their support, to their environments. And I think that played a key role for me in who I am and why I'm so sure in the fact that I know myself. And why then I have nothing to fear about in that sense. Of course, I am a young mind and I'm not the strongest person physically, so that can be downsides, perhaps, but I look at it like, well, you can't destroy my soul, so I'll take the same point of view as Gandhi on that, right? Poor guy has went through so much, but he knows who he is in his soul, so be it. Right? And who am I to say? I don't even know the guy. The guy was from back then, right? I can only know based on what I saw. I can't even find any interviews online. Barely. I saw one from Fox News of him talking to a cameraman, and that's it. There's only one interview, and it's amazing. And then of course there's a lot of disappearances of people, and you don't know where that comes from, and you can't find information about it online, or at least as much as you'd like. And that concerns me too, of course. But regardless, you got to move on. And when you feel that feeling of doing soul work, of not validating your ego, but really moving forward humanity and its evolution, and knowing that something has to be done, that the world is not seeing what has to be done, then you really do have drive. It's certainly not an ego. It's certainly not an identity situation, because I could describe to you guys for hours about why I think and why I've come to the conclusion why I'm, I guess you can say, a spiritual person, why I think there is such a thing as the soul that I talk about, why I think there's such a thing as the human spirit, and people who have created movements in the past and all this. It's a very true phenomenon, and it's highly undervalued. And I think it's mostly because people are taking everything from other people, and they refuse to look at their own natural environment to come to their own conclusions as much as people did in the past, because they didn't have technology, and they weren't wrapped around identity, and they did have families. I mean that. So, of course, within this nature of a life path, everything persists of natural law in the world, as everything is governed by such, and your control is obviously within your own life. So the world persists longer than you, from based on what we know, but you are also one with the world, and your control of yourself within that world lives within your lifespan. So you have to make the right choices for the future. Thank you very much for listening. I know this was a pretty darn long podcast. I hope you were in for the treat of listening to it. And sorry if I always go into my usual rants, but maybe that shows even more the passion that I have to want to help humanity in different ways. At the very least, show them these diagrams, even if they don't listen to all hour long of my words about it. So, like I said, thank you for everybody who's rightfully concerned for me, not being able to get my videos published or anything like that. But I promise you there's a lot to come. I will always fight for the truth. It is in me to do so. And so I will always continue to do so. I'm not going for money. I know that money might be a requirement in the future, but I trust this life. And I know there's always options of getting things, so I shall attract when the time comes. But as for now, I always live my day as if it's my last and always do my best to do the best that I can. And heck, right? Different things can happen in life, and I think that goes for a lot of people. I know a lot of people in this community who've struggled with drugs and all sorts of different things, and I can say, proudly that my situation has nothing crime related in relation to this. It has nothing to do with my friends or family or anything like that, if anybody wants any more clearance. But frankly, I think, I talked much about it as that I should, because I don't know really what I could or should say, or if it really helps anybody. So, of course, stay tuned, because there's always a lot to come and a lot to see. So stay true to yourself and keep striving. Peace out. This is Corey and Angelat. Nature is the answer.